Welcome to my review for Final Destination 5, the final film in this franchise. This one came out in 2011. It's hard to believe it's been 10 years now since the last of these. Time really does fly when you're my age. This one was directed by Steven Quale, a man whose most famous credits are probably as a second unit director. He performed this function in Avatar and Titanic, so possibly he's good buddies with James Cameron. I've not heard of any of the films that he's directed himself, apart from this one, so this would definitely be the most famous of those. Now, I'm not going to give you a plot synopsis today because I think if you're watching a review of the fifth film in this series, then you'll definitely know what the gist is by now. But I will tell you where the big accident takes place at the start. It takes place on a bridge in Vancouver, the sort of massive bridge that would take most vehicles like 10 minutes to cross over. Now, I don't have any particular fear of this type of bridge, but nevertheless, this is an amazing sequence that starts this film off. It's definitely one of the best opening set pieces of all the 5 movies. It's really exciting watching the main characters clinging onto railings for dear life and trying to walk over thin bits of scaffolding like trapeze artists. And even though the deaths in the premonition are obviously not canon for the rest of the film, there's some really juicy ones. So one guy gets killed by boiling tar, somebody else falls 200 yards and lands on the sharp bit of a yacht. There's an amazing moment where we see about 200 cars just topple down into the water below, and it looks seamless. It's some really good CGI that they've put together. So yeah, I absolutely love these opening scenes on the bridge. Unfortunately, once we get past this, this is definitely one of the poorer Final Destination films, I would say. I've got lots of complaints and misgivings to get through today. So let's start with the plot, which follows the usual formula for the most part, but this time there's a little bolt on the end. So the characters find out that if they murder somebody who is not on death's list, then they themselves will be taken off death's list because death will be happy to just take the person who was murdered instead of them. Now, I'm all for a franchise trying new things to avoid going stale, but I'm not sure this particular idea worked as well as the writers were hoping for several reasons. So firstly, one of the scariest things about this series has always been the fact that death is inescapable. If you're on death's list, then sooner or later your ticket is going to get punched. It might be straight away, it might be 6 months down the line when you're having a beer outside a cafe in Paris, but you're going to kick the bucket one way or the other. Even if you put yourself in a padded cell in an insane asylum, who knows? Maybe later that night the whole building will blow up due to a gas leak or something. I know that technically doesn't happen to Clear Rivers in the second film, or whatever her name was, but maybe it should have done just to prove a point. Most of the main characters in this series do not survive because it's so hard to cheat death. There's those 2 at the end of the second film who make it out, but depending on whether or not you believe certain deleted scenes to be canon, maybe they don't survive. So come this 5th film, it feels a little bit cheap, therefore, that the characters have this chance to survive by murdering somebody. And I've also got to question how it is that Tony Todd's mortician character even has this information. I'm just going to call him Tony Todd in this review, by the way. I don't know what his character's name is meant to be called. In fact, forget that for a second. Why is it that Tony Todd is now telling these guys this information? Were the characters in the first 2 movies not worthy of having a chance to kill to survive? Also, I found it extremely unsatisfying that they chose the Peter character to be the one to try and exploit the loophole, because I'd quite enjoyed him up until this point. And I don't get why he would find it so impossible to push a random stranger into oncoming traffic. Yet he's perfectly happy to go and buy a gun, march into a restaurant and attempt to blow Molly away whilst looking her directly in the eye. This made no sense to me, unless he has some secret feelings to her and he's using the whole death list thing as an excuse to bump her off. But there's no indication during the movie up until this point that he fancies her or has a grudge against her or her boyfriend Sam. He seems completely devoted to his own girl Candice, and once Candice dies he seems completely cut up about it. So it was just totally out of left field that he would want to go and attack Molly in this way, and by extension Sam. It just didn't tie into what we'd seen up to this point. On the subject of Molly and Sam, they are a really poor final pair, especially on the Molly side. I mean, she is just the biggest wet drip of a final girl I have seen in a long time. It's surprising that the series would drop the ball in this way, because after a slow start with the Ali Larter character from the first film, there's been some terrific final girls in this series. All the girls in 2, 3 and 4, very strong, but Molly brings absolutely nothing to this film whatsoever. And she does that annoying thing that you see sometimes in films where a girl will try and persuade her boyfriend that they should break up because she doesn't want to get in the way of his dream job. Now, this trope, if you can call it that, just really pisses me off whenever it rears its ugly head. And in this instance, I don't get why Sam has to go to Paris to pursue his dreams anyway. According to Google, there are 660,000 restaurants in the United States, so the idea that you have to leave America to have a cooking career is just absolute nonsense as far as I'm concerned. Sam is still a better character than Molly, though. Having said that, I can't actually picture what Sam looks like, and I only saw the film a few nights ago. If you put a picture up of the male lead from Final Destination 4 alongside a picture of Sam from number 5, I'm not 100% certain I would be able to tell you who was in which film. They just seem to cast the same looking guy to be the male lead in so many horror films. Early 20s, short back and sides hairdo, fresh-faced, generally an all-round nice guy. I don't know if it's because I'm a bloke myself and I don't fancy other blokes, but I mean, what do you think? If you're a woman watching this and you like this series, can you remember all the blokes from all the films? Because I honestly can't. I can remember all the final girls though, and yet to my mind they all look very different from each other. Anyway, the supporting characters in this are a little bit better. I liked Isaac for at least the first half of the movie. I think by the time he gets to the massage parlour, the writers start to have a little bit too much fun with him. Dennis is very funny. I like his little exchanges with the FBI. David Koechner played a very similar character to Dennis in Piranha 3 Double D, so he seems to have found himself a little niche there of the kind of ignorant arsehole that he plays in both movies. Nathan and Olivia were just non-entities, though. Candice was very good. I think Ellen Rowe, who played Candice, might have been a better choice to play the lead girl in this, actually. Sometimes the best-looking girl in the cast is not necessarily the best choice to play the lead, and Ellen Rowe just had a little bit more about her than Emma Bell, in my opinion. I'm not trying to trash Emma Bell's acting. Maybe she's good in other movies. The solo deaths, as I like to call them, didn't really do a lot for me either. The only ones I enjoyed were those which happened in the final 5 minutes, which are sort of tied into some kind of twist. This idea that the whole film is a prequel to Final Destination 1 I thought was quite cleverly handled, though my first thought when I realised this was, oh, what a twist. If only the film up to this point had been any good, then it would have been an awesome twist. It was nice to see Molly dying a violent death, bouncing off the wing of the plane, although I personally would have had her going into one of the plane's propellers like that bloke on Die Hard 2. I think that would have been the perfect ending for Molly, but not to worry. Nathan's death is very good, having part of the plane come down and go through the roof of the bar that he's in. I thought that was brilliant. So if I'm going to move towards summarising this film, it's very easy actually. Great opening with the bridge, a boring hour in the middle, and a decent final 5 minutes, which is just not enough for me to call it a good movie. It's definitely the weakest of the lot for me. In fact, what I'll do is I'll get the bag of terror out and do my score for this, and then before I turn the camera off, I will quickly rank all 5 movies, because I'm not going to do a separate video for that, just to rank 5 movies. It would be a very short video. So as you can probably see, we've got 2 bloody axes out of 5 for Final Destination 5. That makes it the poorest performing film in this series for me. So onto that rankings then. Obviously the 5th film will be bottom. Then in 4th place I would have the original Final Destination. Good original story, but just doesn't have the really cool kills in it that the other films do. In 3rd place, and this is where the films start to get really rewatchable, Final Destination 2. Taking the bronze medal, brilliant performance by AJ Cook, and probably the most clever of all the stories, I think. In 2nd place, though, would be The Final Destination, aka Final Destination 4, whatever you want to call it. I've heard some people say that this is the worst, but not for me. I'd put it in 2nd place. But number 1 would be Final Destination 3, Love Mary Elizabeth Winstead. My main reason for nudging this one ahead of the others would be the fact that I love the roller coaster stuff and the train stuff. And in fact, when I did my top 100 horror movies video a couple of months ago, Final Destination 3 was the only film from this series to make it into that list. I think it came something like 93rd. Now, I do have one more thing to add, which is that I have a pin for the horror locations map. Because of my previous review, The Man Who Could Cheat Death, I forgot to put a pin in there for France, which is an odd little coincidence given the fact that the characters almost go to France in this movie, but not quite. But aside from that, this concludes my Final Destination series. Thank you if you've watched any of these 5 reviews. And who knows, maybe I'll be back to do a review for a potential 6th film in the years ahead. Until then, cheerio, bye-bye.